Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So as of 3:34 PM on Tuesday the 21st of June 2022, I completed my Single Maths Pure and Mechanics exam, completing my A-levels and finishing school. That means all the time I had been spending revising can now be free again to make videos, which I'm super excited about. I am currently working on a massive 6-video long project that I hope to be dropping the first part for sometime soon. But in today's video, I want to talk about what is, in my opinion, the best Thomas fan film, and that is The Little Westerner. A couple of disclaimers before I start. First, there are way too many Thomas fan films out there for me to see even half of them, so this video is purely the best out of the ones I've seen. Second, this review is pretty spoiler heavy. If you haven't watched Little Westerner yet, and intend to, which I highly recommend, I advise you pause this video and go and watch it first. Link will be in the description. And third, I don't think this really needs to be said at this point, but this is all just my opinion. None of this is hard fact. So, the film opens with some narration, and the slow reveal of Oliver as he goes on a charge of his passenger run. What this film does great right off the bat is introducing every character quickly, as if we'd already known them. We learn right away that Oliver is quite reckless, obsessed with speed rather than safety. There are definitely some comparisons to be made with Thomas at the start of his journey. Arrogant, reckless, and over-enthusiastic. We then meet the other characters, and they're all set up pretty much perfectly in their first scene. We learn that Andy is an older, more experienced engine who is quite stern with the youngsters. Riddles is the youngest engine there, and as such is very inexperienced and easily led. He's also a very, well, technically engine, a couple of instances where this is shown, normally when talking to Andy, who he very clearly finds annoying and doesn't really like. Jeremy is very cynical, quite pessimistic, and is one of the most concerned about the upcoming dieselization, and it's clear, even from his first scene, that he never shuts up about it. And Amy is very reasonable, she's kind, she's fair to everyone, and isn't afraid to call others out, as shown with the incident with Oliver and the signal. She is clearly the only engine on the line that everyone has a level of respect for. Right from the gate, this film sets up the main thing looming in British Railways, dieselisation, the idea that all steam engines are under real danger of being scrapped, and in many ways, it's only a matter of time. This is a very smart thing to have a movie about. At this stage, the only character we know anything about is Oliver, and the main thing we know about him is that he's going to, at some point, run away from scrap. So having this film about Oliver with scrap as one of the main themes was a really clever thing to do. The first setup of dieselisation comes when Jeremy's waiting for the stopping train, expecting it to be the usual engine Will, but it turns out it's George. We find out that George is the usual express engine, but has been demoted to stopping trains while a new diesel works the express. Jeremy later volunteers to take a train to Swindon. He's told not to go into the works, but his curiosity gets the better of him. He meets Will, who is about to be scrapped because of his burst cylinder. This gives us our first main insight into the world our characters are living in. It's easy to forget the harsh reality when something's set in the Thomas universe, but not in this film. Whenever a steam engine breaks down, there's a diesel there to take its place, and the steam engine is scrapped.
For every steam engine getting withdrawn and scrapped, diesel is there to fill up the space.
We also get told of the relative safeness of the branch lines. Up to this point, while the main lines were falling to diesels, there was a sense of safeness on the branch lines, as diesels were too heavy for the tracks, somewhat justifying Oliver's naiveness of refusing to believe that diesels should come and replace them. What they're doing in the workshop is coming up with a solution, proving Jeremy's point that the days are numbered.
What they're making isn't going to change the world, it's just going to finish the job.
Jeremy has to leave quickly before he's caught, and arrives back at the yard. Jeremy has now completely accepted that it's over, it is now simply a matter of time. Oliver still doesn't believe it, saying he's been working the line since he was built, and he knows that they won't be replaced. And Jeremy snaps at him for refusing to believe reality. That is until Oliver meets a new branch line diesel. He gets taken off the passenger run for the afternoon to give the diesel a chance. He initially scoffs at it, thinking there's no chance a diesel could be better than him, as Oliver's top speed is 70 and the diesel's is only 50. Oliver's overconfidence then gets the better of him, as he is later told that night that he's now permanently off to passenger run, and the manager has orders to keep him in the shed until they can find a better use for him. Even Jeremy, who has been at odds with Oliver throughout the film, stands up for Oliver in this scene. These engines may have their differences, but they're still united against a common enemy. Later, the diesel slips away, and a mysterious black tank engine and a brake van slip into the yard. The brake van is quickly identifiable as Toad, but the tank engine remains a mystery until the next morning, where he's introduced as Ginty. This is another area the film does so well. There's just enough of a connection to Thomas, while still managing to be its own thing. We all know Toad as Oliver's brake van, and hardcore Thomas fans, of which most of the Thomas fandom on YouTube is, will recognise the name Ginty as one of Percy's friends from the 8 famous engines. As soon as Ginty arrives, it's very clear he's hiding something. He slips in the middle of the night, and then when he's questioned by the manager the next morning, he says he and Toad have always worked together, and when the manager says it's odd, he comes up with a pretty unconvincing excuse that it's clear he's making up on the spot. Ginty seems to be a very strange character. He seems old and wise, keeps coming up with old sayings and philosophical thoughts. He then proceeds to teach Oliver by contradiction. He doesn't try and tell Oliver what he should be doing. Andy and Jeremy would have tried that too often. But Ginty lets Oliver mess up, and then shows him what he should have done. I think Ginty's reaction to Oliver messing up is pretty funny.
What on earth? Oh, you've got to be jumped already!
The last word makes it so much better. He expected Oliver to mess up, but nowhere near as quickly as he did, on his very first job. He then teaches Oliver his first main lesson: take things a bit slower, and you'll do things faster. Oliver points out that makes no sense, but then Ginty points out that if he had taken things slower, the job would have been done by now. As a result of being too impatient, the brakes are now broken, and the cargo has to be transferred into new trucks, delaying a train that was supposed to leave now. Oliver then responds with,
You're good. You know that, right? Yeah.
This is probably the first time, with the possible exception of Amy, that Oliver has respected anyone, that we know of at least. He very clearly doesn't respect Andy. He kept arguing with Jeremy over dieselization, he was big-headed in front of the manager, and he told everyone about how Riddles messed up earlier. Amy is the only other person who he might have respected before this, and then in one morning, Ginty has earned his respect. But then Ginty just leaves Oliver to explain to Amy why the train's not ready yet. Then we have the first real scene to harken back to the original narration. In the opening narration, Oliver says,
You know when your life is just following orders, and you do that constantly, over and over again? It makes you think that it's all out of your control.
Oliver says it's not like engines can do whatever they want, in response to Ginty questioning why he can't go against manager's orders. Ginty then offers himself and Oliver to take Riddles' train, something Oliver questions, and Ginty responds that he's making his own choice. Then, while they're pulling the train, Ginty puts his brakes on. Oliver keeps pushing and asks irritated why he's doing this. Ginty responds that it's Oliver's choice, he could just as easily stop. This section is the most important part of the whole film. This film, as said in the description, is about how Oliver changed from an engine who could never consider running away, not even from scrap, to the engine who would. And this scene is teaching Oliver that they can make their own choices, they're not restricted to just following orders. Oliver goes into the next scene, not as a changed engine, but an engine who's beginning to change. Oliver finally apologises to Jeremy in person, as opposed to the mental apology earlier, and after one last snap, Jeremy apologises back to him. And then in the next scene, Oliver steps up and defends Riddles in front of Andy. He then goes too far, talks a bit longer than he should have, but the changes are beginning to show. We then get the most beautiful scene in the whole film. Amy asks Ginty to tell them about himself. Ginty says there's not much to tell, and Riddles asks him about the picture on his tank. The picture is one of him with Thomas. Ginty then tells them, in a flashback scene, about when he went to Sodor. and it's done so well. When you walk into this film, you know Oliver's going to be the main character, but you think it's still going to be set on Sodor with the characters we all know, or I did at least. When the film starts, we find out it's not on Sodor, but it still works by steam engines. So there's a grimy and industrial feel, but there's still some magic there. When Diesel starts appearing, the grimy atmosphere increases. The grey, dull colours seem to become more apparent, and the magical atmosphere disappears. That's when we get this scene. It's the only appearance of the Thomas characters, other than Oliver, Ginty and Toad, in the whole film, and the contrast is stunning. The colours are bright and beautiful, and there's not a hint of grime anywhere. This place is a safe haven. It still works steam and always will, as opposed to this branch, which still works steam, but not for much longer. Ginty stresses the significance of Thomas getting repaired so quickly. If that happened on the mainland, Thomas would have been left, at least for a little while, maybe indefinitely, and be replaced by a Diesel, saving a bit of money in the process. Or on Sodor, they fixed him overnight. That's what Ginty says is true freedom for an engine. Freedom for an engine isn't running around and doing what you want, it's living on a railway like they always have, with the knowledge of being looked after, knowing they won't get scrapped. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. This film has the perfect amount of Thomas in. They barely appear, but they don't need to. This is Oliver's story, with no distractions from the Thomas characters. But there's just enough Thomas to keep it clearly as a Thomas film, and just enough Thomas to progress Oliver's story. Then the next day comes around. Manager asks if anyone knows where the missing coaches are. Turns out, Oliver's taken a train already, and he's taking Ginty's advice. Do the job slower and properly, rather than rushing and messing up. When Oliver comes back, he gets put back on the passenger run. This is a perfect representation of the manager. He wants to help Oliver. It may have seemed earlier in the film that he was pro-dieselization, but he's not. He wants to help his engines, including Oliver. He let Oliver out of the shed to go and help Ginty at the harbour, when he was told by Control not to. And then, after initially being cross with Oliver for stealing the train, when Ginty points out that Oliver did the job safely and arrived back earlier than the Diesel, the manager apologises to Oliver and goes against Control's orders by putting him back on the passenger run. That night, Ginty and Toad leave. The mysterious atmosphere and suspicion around their arrival continues with them leaving. Ginty says there are no trains for another hour, they're guaranteed for a clear run, and that Control's already onto them. Starts to ring alarm bells of another engine who mentions Control being onto them. Ginty then talks about Oliver, a reckless, arrogant, overconfident engine, while the camera focuses on the picture of Thomas. This confirms the suspicion set up right at the start, that Oliver at the start of the film is the same as Thomas at the start of the Railway series. Ginty tells the sleeping Oliver that he's sure their paths will cross again, and then he and Toad leave, with the simple words, "To Sodor." That's when it hits us. Ginty and Toad are escaping to Sodor. That's why they snuck in, why their stories are so shaky, why they're sneaking away, and why Control is onto them. They're running away from scrap. The next morning, the engines find out that Ginty's gone. The manager has now found out about a mysterious engine sneaking across the country from Euston, how it makes no sense. He asks Oliver if he knows anything about where Ginty is going. Oliver says no, and resumes his morning passenger run. And that's where the film ends, as the credits rolled. There was one thing I didn't mention at any point in the review, as I felt better to talk about it as a whole at the end, and that is the sense of ambiguity around the Diesels. Specifically, are they alive, or are they not? They don't have visible faces, so that would suggest no, but there keep being hints that they are in fact alive. Towards the start of the film, when Jeremy enters the works, Will concluded that he must have been seen entering. Well, we did see some Diesels with where their faces would have been pointing right at him as he entered. Then there are occasions in the film where humans seem to talk to the Diesels, but are they talking to the Diesel, or the driver in their cab? That being said, do the engines even have drivers in this film? We never see them, but it is heavily implied to be set in the same universe as the Railway series, where the engines do have drivers. Then there's a scene where Oliver first meets the Diesel, and Oliver calls him a bit pathetic, followed by the Diesel letting out a loud honk on his horn. Is this a response to Oliver's statement? What else could it be? There are also multiple occasions where the Diesel seems to be watching the engines, especially the scene where Ginty and Toad make their escape. They think they're slipping away quietly, but the Diesel appears to be watching them. And then we have the post-credits scene, where a Diesel pulls a goods train into the yard with a battered Toad as his brake van. Oliver sees him and asks him what happened. He gets no response, and then Oliver asks sternly,
Toad, where is Ginty?
While not directly stating it, it is strongly implied that Ginty was caught and he was scrapped. All we know for sure is that he lost Toad and didn't make it to Sodor, which really leaves scrap as the only viable option. This post-credit scene ties everything together. At the credits, it was a very good film, but didn't really make sense as a prequel. Toad went off with Ginty to Sodor, but he was supposed to go off with Oliver. That's where this scene comes in. It confirms that Ginty and Toad didn't make it, and now Oliver is going to rescue Toad from that Diesel. Toad is going to tell them what they had done, and they are going to make their big break to Sodor. The Little Westerner is a truly wonderful prequel. Its cinematography looks like it was made for an actual cinema. The soundtrack is brilliant and fits really well, and the writing and voice acting is outstanding. The tone is also done really well. This film is quite dark, but doesn't get that much darker than the books and classic era did. This perfectly rides the gap between what would and wouldn't be acceptable, even in the Golden Age from 1945 to 98. While there's a chance it would be too dark for even Audrey or Allcroft to put out, it's definitely conceivable that they would have done, especially Audrey. You have dark Thomas fan films, like Tobias and the Half Pariah, which is really good, but obviously way too dark to ever be released. But then you have ones like this, which are dark enough, but not too dark. But there's also the little unstated things that add to it. It's not directly stated, or even implied, but logic would suggest that all of Andy, Riddles, Jeremy and Amy are going to be scrapped. Only Oliver made his escape to Sodor, so unless they went to the Bluebell Railway or something like that, they're all gone. And these are characters that we all seem to know so well, despite only seeing them in one fan-made film. I have one singular complaint for this film, and it's not the fault of the film, or the creator, or anyone involved. It's YouTube's stupid made-for-kids thing. This is such a brilliant piece of work. My first thought after watching it was, let's go to the comments and see what everyone says about it. Then I find out I can't. There are no comments, because YouTube has set it as made for kids. Thanks YouTube. Thanks for messing this up. So, that was my review of the stunning fan film that is The Little Westerner. I would honestly say it's definitely better than all bar 3 of the actual Thomas films, and stands a good chance of being better than all of them. As I said in the start of this video, I have a huge 6-video project that I am working on. I currently have planned all 6 episodes, and nearly finished work on the first one, so expect that to drop fairly soon. Also, I feel like I should explain why my Tug series has dropped off. The reason I chose to do all the voice acting myself, despite not being happy at all with the end result, is that I knew getting together a cast of voice actors and getting them all to send in lines would be too much stress and hassle that I could cope with while doing my A-levels. However, I decided to draw the line on doing female voices. The first 2 episodes were all male casts, but episode 3 was when I started to need female roles. I asked 2 people to do it, both of whom said yes, but then never got back to me. Both of them are also busy people, and I couldn't be bothered to hassle them, so episode 3 has never come out, but I promise you the episodes are coming at some point. Also, as you may have noticed, I uploaded a YouTube short earlier today. I've decided to join the dark side and make a TikTok account. I hope to be able to release videos more regularly on there than on here, so go give me a follow, link will be in the description. So, this has been my 4th big return video, and hopefully, this time, I'll stick to it and be back for good. With A-levels out the way, I should be able to make videos more regularly. Please like this video and comment down below your views on The Little Westerner, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I shall see you in another video very soon.